Hey guys, Alexeja here, and today is part 2 of building Fishbones. So first, you're going to want to grab your pattern you made, and we are going to be making his fins first. So grab that pattern and trace it onto purple insulation foam and cut it out using the X-Acto knife. Cut just a little bit larger than the piece you traced, because when you're carving it into shape, you want it to be carved to the size of your pattern, so cut just a little bit bigger. It's kind of like adding seam allouts. Using your Dremel, you're going to be shaping each of your fin pieces to the right shape. Just start by slowly carving the top and the bottom to shape, and then you're going to slowly thin out the edges so it looks more boxy like a fin. After you are finished with the Dremel, you're going to use your hand sanding utensils and hand sand down your purple insulation foam until it is smooth and you are happy with the smoothness. Next, I began to work on Fishbones' head. I created a pattern out of craft foam and made sure it was the right size. And then I took apart my pattern with craft foam and took the head pieces and traced it onto EVA foam so I would have a better material for his head. I traced the pieces onto EVA foam. The EVA foam was just a little bit smaller, so I had to glue another piece of EVA foam to that piece to make it bigger so it would fit his head. After both head pieces were cut out, I then began to shape them. I used my heat gun and heated the pieces of EVA foam until they were shiny, and then I just formed the pieces until they were kind of cylinder so it looked like Fishbones' head. After the head pieces were formed to shape, I then used my Dremel and went across the edges and got any imperfections that were across the edges of his head and made sure everything was nice and smooth. To connect the two head pieces, I just used my hot glue gun and slowly went down from the tip all the way down to the bottom of it and slowly glued and held my pieces together so that they would hold together properly and there wouldn't be any holes. Next, I began on the piece on the inside of Fishbones' mouth. I used the pattern I made out of craft foam and traced my piece onto EVA foam, cut it out with the X-Acto knife, and then used my Dremel to shape it to the right shape and get all the edges nice and smooth. And I shaped the edges a little bit flatter so it would complement his face and his teeth.
In the spirit of things, we lose our sight when we put our trust in things of this material world, of things that fade away. Let me keep coming back, 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 keep coming back.
after I made sure everything was the right size and everything was nice and sanded down, I took my hot glue gun and just slowly hot glued the edges and held it to the head of Fishbones and made sure everything was nice and straight and everything was nice and aligned, and made sure his face was nice and glued to his other face. Next, I started on his teeth. I used the pattern that I made out of craft foam, traced his tooth, and cut it out with the X-Acto knife. I then used the Dremel and shaped the edges until it was the shape of his tooth. You're going to want to take your time doing this because each tooth is different. It's just a different shape. So you're going to want to take your time and make sure it's the right shape. So slowly use your Dremel, carve away at the sides, and then cut in the edges a little bit so it's more boxy like you did with the fin. You're going to be repeating the same process for each and every tooth. You're going to trace it, cut it out, and then you're going to start carving it. You're going to carve it to shape, and then you're going to carve in the sides so it looks more boxy. You're going to do this for 6 teeth, so take your time and don't rush it. Make sure out of each piece that you cut out of the insulation foam and you carve, after you finish using the Dremel, use your hand sanding utensils and make sure you make it nice and smooth, because otherwise it's going to look really rough. You need to smooth it out until it's nice and smooth and you are happy with the smoothness.
Of things we know.
After you get the tooth to shape, you're going to lay it on the head, and then you're going to trace around it so you have it in the right spot on the head and you know exactly where it's supposed to go. Trace it out on the head and then use your Dremel and sand down where you're going to put the tooth so that that piece where you're going to put the glue is nice and smooth. You're going to do that, and then since the tooth is a little too fat, you're going to sand down the back of the tooth as well so that it fits flush and looks nice on the head. You're just going to sand the back of the tooth and sand the head so it looks nice and flush together. You are going to repeat this process for each one of the teeth. Make sure you trace it onto the head, sand down the piece where you're going to add it, and sand down the back of the tooth so it fits nice and flush. Repeat this process for each one of the teeth. Using your hot glue gun, you're just going to hot glue each of the teeth in place and make sure you hold it in the right spot to make sure you have everything in the right spot. Next, I began on the piece on the back of Fishbones' head. I just drew it on a scrap piece of EVA foam I had and cut it out with the X-Acto knife. It's just a long rectangular piece. I lost some of the foam for it, but I cut it out and then I attached it onto his head, and then I sanded down the edges so it would look nice and shaped around his head. It's just sanding down the edges so that they were a little bit flatter and complemented his head better. I lost the part of film where I made his eyebrows, but it's the same thing. You just cut your piece out to shape and then just carve down the edges and smooth down the edges and then attach it with some hot glue. But next we're going to be using the soldering iron, and just be careful with this because it is hot and you don't want to mess up. So use your soldering iron, and I traced out the pieces behind his eyes and then I used the soldering iron. It'd be a lot easier if you did it that way. But you're just going to slowly burn in the pieces in the back of his head. I thought that burning it in would be a lot better than cutting it out completely. So just slowly do that, take your time. But that will conclude part 2 of building Fishbones. There will be one more building video, and then we can begin painting and the assembly. I'm sorry that there's so many parts to this video, but I'm trying to make everything so you guys can see everything on how I'm building Fishbones. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. My name's Alexeja, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!